Good morning. Welcome to episode 129 of the Driller Newscast, a weekly update on the news and stories impacting the drilling, the construction, the water, and the geothermal industry. I'm your host, Brock Yorty. We're going to jump right into a feature this week with the co-founder of the Geothermal Drillers Association, Robert Meyer, also president of Thermex Geothermal. He's going to talk with the heat collaboration with IGSPA and the Geothermal Drillers Association, students that just graduated from the pilot geothermal drilling tutorial that wrapped up a few weeks ago in Boston. And these young men and women had great questions, and Robert had some great advice and insight. And as I was going back and reviewing this, I felt we got to talk about this industry. We need to hear Robert's words, and we need to continue to champion his thoughts and processes as we move forward. These students right now are actively looking for their job as a geothermal field technician, as a field technician, definitely not as a helper, because we're developing more than just helpers. So we're going to jump right into this. Thank you so much, Robert. It was wonderful. The amount of time, knowledge, and advice you dropped. I hope you all enjoy as much as we did listening to Robert. Thank you. Geothermal is much bigger than just heating and cooling homes, right?
The opportunities for the technologies used for heat collection and rejection in HVAC is boundless. There are so many. What I think about is when I was a kid, I was driving down the California coast with my dad, and we crested Pomona, if anybody knows where that is. It's north of LA, and you can see the whole LA basin from Pomona. And the smog was horrible. The climate changes as you crest that hill and go into the LA basin. And why is that? It's not as much to do with exhaust and all of these things, but it's a heat island, like so many metro areas are. And so the opportunities to take this heat and move it other places in a more controlled way than just strict reflection and radiation back into the airspace. There are so many things that people are working on at so many different levels, and the opportunities within this space are boundless. And so, it's what I find interesting is I think that most people in our industry, Brock, are viewing geothermal as an industry like with this lens that's this big, and they're not really seeing all of the things that are happening on the outside, all of the different ways that technology is being used to improve even just the loops that we use. There's been no improvements in the loops that we use since 1972. There's been some different manufacturers and some changes in designs to U-bends and different thicknesses and all of that stuff, but it's still HDPE tubing, DR9 or DR11 HDPE tubing, nothing really changed. But there are things that are changing there, and there are things that are changing with the grouts that are being used. And Brock's working on a project right now with the U.S. government on other grouts that are more effective, and so there's so many things that are happening that allow us the opportunity to, the way I have described it to many people that I'm working with on this, is re-envision or reimagine. I love it. I love when people say, you can't do that. That can't be done. Okay, deal. I'll show you. I love that. And I've done it time and time again in the environmental and clean water and geotech, and now I'm going to do it in geothermal because you can't do that. I was talking to Brock about a rig, Tuesday? And I said, somebody told me I can't do this. And I said, no, I can. They said that rig's limited to 300 feet. And I said, I could easily go to 900 feet, probably deeper. And, I don't need to tell them how I'm going to do it, but I'll show them, and so I think there's so much opportunity to reimagine how we think about the built environment and the things that we can do with heat. And this isn't like I don't approach this from like a strict environmentalism perspective. Um, sustainability and renewability at the end of the day, if it's not profitable, it's never going to work. Because the government cannot fund everything. And so what we need to do is find solutions that are profitable. Because once it becomes profitable to be sustainable, then everybody's on board. And there's a reason that sustainability has fallen into this category of kind of a four-letter word. Because that's just government, whatever, overreach and all of this stuff. Because people don't see how it can be profitable, and they say it's just an expense. But the reality is that it's an investment. And so if we start really thinking about all of the different ways that it's an investment and all of the different returns, there's real business returns, but then there's also community returns. And then, from the perspective of the building that you're sitting in right now, if the owner can achieve not only a fiscal return on investment, but then also a PR return on investment on top of it, they're like, yeah, well, let's go finance it. Let's go get it funded, because I'm already not well liked as a landlord, period. Sorry, but no landlord is like, oh, you're a landlord? That's awesome. I want to do that when I grow up. Like, that's just not a thing that happens. And so, you start finding ways to save building owners money, because there's already all these other things that are costing building owners money, and then allow them to say, you know what, here's the community benefit, and here's what we're going to do to give back to the community. When you can make community benefit profitable, everybody wins.
So we've went high level and we've zoomed way out. You said you started as a helper. Um, I believe you had already met your wife at that point, so you didn't have to play up the sexiness of I get to be a helper. But can you talk about like lessons learned, roles and responsibilities? What can make you the best field technician to get to the point of being an assistant driller or eventually owning a company like Thermex Geothermal? So I know we got a big track there, but just start with that. How did you end up in drilling and where you are today? Somebody hit you
Number
over the
one,
head and you got kidnapped and that's how you became
right?
a driller.
No, number one is I've had in my life different periods of saying yes and saying no. And I think an important part entering any industry is a willingness to say yes, a willingness to take a little bit of risk, a willingness to venture into the unknown a little bit, and allow yourself to be in a situation that you've not been in before, because you know that at the end of the day, you're going to learn something. So I think that there has to be a willingness to say yes. Not blindly, right? Like blindly saying yes puts us in dangerous situations, but being in a position to say, yeah, I'll try that. I'll go over there and I'll help those people out and I'll see what I can learn. And then along the way, while you're there, ask questions. I think that I annoyed a lot of people when I started because I was asking questions that were deemed to be stupid. I was told that's a dumb question. And I said, that's great. I still don't know the answer. Help me. And I think that I annoyed some people along the way. And I just, okay, well, from my perspective, if I don't ask the dumb questions, I'm never going to learn. So I don't really care if they think it's dumb. And ultimately, those people found their way out because they weren't a good fit for the industry. They weren't a good fit for the company. And that provided me the opportunities. And along the way, because I was persistent about asking my questions, I didn't have to start from ground zero to figure out how to take over their position. I think another thing is identifying if you're in a healthy company. And by healthy company, I don't mean financially healthy. I mean, is this a place where I can grow? Is this a place where somebody is going to want to teach me? Or am I merely here to hold a shovel? If I'm just here to hold a shovel, that's not a place I want to be. because that's not me. I have grander visions for my life than just being a laborer for the rest of it. That's not to say that if you find a good company and you're a laborer and you're a laborer for 30 years, more power to you. Whatever works for you and your family. You know, not speaking poorly about that, but is there an opportunity if I want to ask questions and grow? And then the other thing is being willing to be honest with yourself. And when I say that, at various points in our careers, we get topped out or we get stagnant. And it's not necessarily because the company is bad or because the people you're working with are bad. It's just there are certain capacity constraints that any company and any team have. And some of them are driven by time, some of them are driven by money, some of them are driven by opportunity. It doesn't matter. And sometimes we just need to take a step back and be like, okay, now I know where I want to go. Is that really possible here? Regardless of what anyone will tell you, because people hate change, right? So if most of the time, if I go to my boss and I say, here's what I want to do, they're going to say a lot of different things to try to craft this plan to align with what I want to do. But I have to be willing to be honest with myself. And is that actually possible here? Or is somebody making promises that they just honestly can't keep? And they really want to keep me because they don't want to have to backfill my position if I leave. And it's okay. It's okay to be honest with ourselves, because at the end of the day, the only person who is the most worried about us and our career is right here. It's the person sitting in that chair. That is the only one who is going to be number one worried about your career. That's the only one that's going to be number one worried about your life and your potential. It's you. Now, I love everybody that I work with, and I want to set everybody up for success. But I'm not going to get into everybody's head and drive their bus for them. They got to drive their own bus. Tell me what you need from me to get to where you want to go. But at the end of the day, you got to drive your own bus. And so really just a willingness to be honest with myself about where I want to go, what I want to do, who I want to surround myself with, so that I can achieve what I want to achieve for myself and for my family.
What are your roles and responsibilities, and what are the expectations as a boss of that employee for that first month?
I don't like to hire helpers. There's a certain I want to hire people that want to do more. I guess is a better way to put it. I want to hire somebody that wants to learn how to run a rig. I want to hire somebody that sees the vision, shares my vision. And so for that reason, there's only drillers and assistant drillers at Talon. There's no technicians, there's no laborers, there's no helpers. All right, I'm ready for questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead. Say your name again. Stand up. Be loud.
Hi, my name is Jesse. I just have a quick question. What's the most difficult aspect of becoming a driller?
Being a driller is a mental game. I can teach anybody to pull levers. A common question that I have for people that apply and interview as drillers is, are you a driller or are you a lever puller? A driller will get highly offended by that question. So I know immediately where they fall within that. And there's also, I've gotten a response. I'll tell you, I got a response from a guy and he said, right now I'm a lever puller. And I was like, that's a new one. That is a new answer. But that's vulnerability to say, I know how to run the rig, but I do not feel that I am qualified to call myself a driller. So that was a degree of vulnerability and self-awareness that was the first time that happened. That's a person I want to work with, right? But the biggest challenge is there's some weird stuff that happens in downhole. There's just some weird stuff. It's easy to say, I did something wrong that has led to this outcome. And maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. But it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the problem is what it is right now, not whatever decision happened 10 or 15 minutes ago to lead us to here. And so we need to toss all of that stuff away and work on what is in front of us, assessing the facts that are in front of us and making a decision. And so to answer your question about the hardest aspect is getting out of your own way, to identify what the facts are, process of elimination of what could be occurring, narrow it down to a couple of things, and start running tests. When I think about drilling problems, it's very similar to when we go back to elementary science class and we're first learning about the scientific method. Develop a hypothesis, and then you start testing this hypothesis to reach a conclusion. You do the same thing in drilling all the time. There was an example just last week on a site in New Mexico. I had a crew drilling and boring to 105 feet. They drilled to 105 feet, no issues. They turned the air off. All of a sudden, some weird stuff started happening. We started getting returns coming back up the hole 15 minutes after we turned the compressor off. But that driller, he took a minute to say, wow, this is weird, and then stopped and he said, here are the things that I think could be happening. And we talked through it and we devised a plan and move forward. And ultimately we finished the hole. And so again, it just, how do I get out of my own head? How do I get out of my own way? So I'm not the guy that's like, this isn't going according to the plan that I had this morning, and now I'm going to throw my hard hat and I'm going to throw my pipe wrench and I'm just going to, stomp angrily like a child around the site because my plan isn't working. That's the biggest challenge.
Next question.
My name is Rizzotti. I have a question. How was your transition from driller to CEO? Like, what did you have to sacrifice in order to get there?
Well, so it's interesting. It wasn't quite so simple, right? So when I first made a transition from the field to the office, when we're talking about drilling, we often talk about the office. So you have field operations and you have the office. The office is your overhead staff, management, sales, whatever. When I first made that transition, I was moving from, we'll call it a driller. It's a little bit more complicated, but we'll just say driller to operations management, operations manager. When I was the operations manager, I was actually a driller, a helper, a mechanic, fleet manager, HR manager. Like, I was all of these things. And then I was working like 80 hours a week. It was ridiculous. It was not sustainable. Good thing I was like 24, because I could not do that today. I just couldn't. And then what that allowed me to do was then prioritize. My priority was operations manager, which means everything else goes down the list, and I start delegating, figuring out how to cut these other things off the bottom. And as I cut them off the bottom, it allows me to be a better operations manager. And then after that, I moved into what we'll call general manager, meaning I was running the office completely. There's some differences between operations and general manager, but again, when I was a general manager, I had a transition phase of, I was the GM, so I was worried about the financial performance of the company, of the office. But then I was also worried about making sure that operationally we had everything that we needed. But my priority, my title was general manager. So that had to be first. And then I had to start cutting off the bottom these other tasks and train people to do them and get them off of me. And then after that, I went back into project management for a while because I was just burnt out on the financial management stuff, and I wanted to just do projects. And that allowed me to get back to this place of being able to learn, because when I was just managing, I was no longer learning anything about drilling. I was hardly ever even on a drilling site. And that wasn't a place I liked to be at that time. And then after that, I went back into a general management role, and I approached it differently that time, because I started training people to do my general management tasks, so that then I could go. When you're talking about business management, there are two major functions. People are either working in the business or they are working on the business. When you're working in the business, you're worried about the day-to-day functionality of the business, getting proposals out, getting invoices out, getting paid, talking to clients, those types of things. When you're working on the business, you're improving the processes that allow the business to function. You're improving the staff that do the work every day. You are up and out, seeing what opportunities are on the horizon, those types of things. Once I started doing that, that allowed me the opportunity to look at Thermex, start Thermex, and now I'm in Thermex, general manager, operations manager, business development, HR, all of it. But now I'm going back to what I did before, which is, okay, what does it do? I need to be the president, which means I need to work on the business. So I need to find people to work in the business. And so I have found an operations person that I am going to hire before the end of the year. It's a guy that has worked for me off and on for more than a decade. And that will allow me to continue working on the business and not have to work in it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Julian, what would you say the three most important skills to becoming a driller?
I don't think it's skills. I think there are traits. Traits are more important than skills. I mean, that's going back to earlier in some of the things that I was talking about. Successful drillers all have different skills, but they all have similar traits. Really working on critical thinking. I guess that's a skill, right? We'll call that a skill. Critical thinking and exercising your brain to solve problems with an open mind. I think that critical thinking is often degraded to be something that it's not, but really critical thinking is a willingness and ability to see parts of problems that are not immediately obvious, or to read something and gain a message that's not on the paper, so critical thinking, a willingness to put yourself into challenging situations with a group of people, not knowing where you're going to end up. I don't know how to say that in a more concise way, but one of the things that I do outside of work is I do a lot of work with dogs in protection sports, and that involves a lot of dog biting and things like that, normally violent activities. That is some of the most mentally challenging work, because you have to make decisions like this, and a dog is paying attention to you and nobody else. And so it really makes you work through problems like really quickly. Probably the most mentally challenging thing I've ever done is to work with dogs. That helps me keep my brain going. But then also that challenges my critical thinking and open mind to say, what am I not seeing here? What am I adding to this problem? Because it's usually me. When you're training a dog, it's usually not the dog that's the problem, it's the person. So dog trainers aren't dog trainers, they're people trainers. But anyway, same thing applies with drilling. Normally, the rig is a machine. The problem is normally not with the rig, it's with the person pulling all those levers on the control panel. That's where the problem is, right? So a willingness to be vulnerable and self-aware and, challenge your own thinking. What am I doing that I can do differently? And that, comes with some humility. And so the last thing is time. I think that a lot of people want to rush onto this step. A lot of people want to rush onto the control panel. And you can do that, but the faster you rush, the more you're just going to be a lever puller. And it's not meant to be demeaning, but there are certain things that just take time to hone. When I first started, I rushed to get on the step because I was, young and motivated, and I knew better than everybody else. And I got myself into some problems doing that. I'll be the first one to tell you. And so it took time for me to find the humility to be able to recognize that, yeah, that problem, that was my own creation. And it was because I was unwilling to listen to anybody else. And so that, that just comes with time. Like there's no way around it when we're kids and, we're yelling at our parents because I know better than you and you're wrong and whatever. And they just sit back and they say, okay, because I'm not going to fix this right now. The only way this is going to be fixed is by letting you go, mess it up, and learn the hard way. And so we have to kind of suffer through some of those things, some hard lessons, or watching other people make poor decisions. And it all just comes down to time and willing, just ask questions. One of my favorite questions for people is, tell me about your most challenging project. Because I learn a lot of experience without having to learn the hard way by saying, tell me about your most challenging project. And that that easily turns into an hour and a half or 2 hour long discussion of tell me what you learned the problem was. What were you putting into it that was a problem? Because anybody that's worth anything in the drilling business has some self-awareness and willingness to be, I was pushing this crew like way too hard given the constraints that they had. And that was causing them to take shortcuts. And that resulted in, these things. So it all just comes back down to time to learn. And it's okay to sit back in your role that you're at right now and just learn.
Hi, I'm C. I wanted to know what the process was for like state to state jobs. Like what would I do to, I don't know, how do you operate on state to state jobs? Like if I wanted to continue.
Like operating between multiple states?
Yes. Relocation and.
So just making sure that I'm understanding the question. Are you asking about a specific occupation with a specific company moving between two companies in between two different states?
Staying here, working, but expanding as like in another state, residing in another state.
Okay, so I understand. So there's a couple of issues. Depends on what you do. If you are not if you're not a driller, then it's easier. Once you become a driller, then it becomes more difficult. And it becomes more difficult because there's several different, we'll call them regimes. There's several different licensing regimes that are used for drilling in the United States. California, New Mexico, Georgia, and several others. There is a license holder at a company. That company is a licensed well drilling company. And now anyone that is employed by that company that is technically competent, as deemed by the license holder, can operate a drill rig and drill wells in that state. There are other states, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, some others, South Carolina, where the individual is the license holder. So you have to individually be licensed to operate in that state. Massachusetts is one of them. Now, in Massachusetts, you can have multiple drill rigs operating on a site under one license holder, but that license holder has to be on site. In Washington, every driller has to have a license. Or they have to have a driller sitting on the rig overseeing the person on the controls. And so it really kind of depends. on what your role is and what your goal is and all of those things. There's also some states that have reciprocity agreements. One of the things that Brock and I are working on is trying to simplify all of this. Like, it's crazy when you zoom out and you look at all 50 states. If you tried to like group different states and their licensing practices together, it's nearly impossible because they're all different. There's a group of like 14 that fall in one group, and then everybody else is like on their own program. And so it is a challenge. I took a test yesterday for my Georgia license. I was in and out in like 3 minutes. The lady at the test center was like, "Are you sure you're done?" I was like, "Yeah, I've done this once or twice because I'm a license holder in 6 states. And so there's a lot of tests that I've taken. You can't throw a drilling test in front of me that I don't know what the answers are at this point, just through repetition." But to answer your question, it just depends. You got to identify which states, why, what it costs, because then you have insurance and bonding requirements. We haven't talked about bonds at all. Bonds are a challenge. And it's basically getting someone to give you a line of credit for anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 that's just sitting, that you've signed, saying, "Yep, this insurance company thinks I'm worth this 50 grand," and you got to turn that into the state to get your license.
So if there's a environmental incident or something, the state can go after that bond for what you've done. So you have more stakes than, "Oops, I screwed up. I guess my license gets revoked." All right, dude, I know you got to roll. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking your time tonight.
All righty. Well, I
Thank you.
appreciate the time. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for episode 129 of the Driller Newscast. Next week, we're back 100% into the news. There's a ton of news going on with the San Joaquin Valley having a court case over pumping of the aquifers, and the courts siding with the farmers saying they should be able to pump what they need. Got a lot more to talk about with thermal networks and PFAS. There's so much coming out right now. And let's face it, we are 30 days, just a little over, until election day. And we need to start thinking about those champions. Again, we got great new professionals entering this industry every day. The construction industry is hiring 35,000 new workers a month right now. This is a great time to be in drilling, to be in construction drilling, water well drilling, geothermal drilling, environmental investigation. We're going to have some great things coming out of the NDA on next week's episode. There's so much going on, but Robert, thank you so much. Stacy, thank you. Angie, Zainab, Andrew, and all of these great students will have the graduation ceremony out in its own standalone video. We have all these great emerging drillers entering the industry and wanting to develop. It's a great time to be in this industry. Cheers, everybody.